extreme how-to. I recently installed this tongue and groove pine flooring, and two of the most important tools I used, this toe chain and these hex nuts. Today I'll show you how to install distressed pine flooring. Tongue and groove pine installs just like most nail-down hardwood floors. Allow the flooring to acclimate in the living space prior to installation. Install a moisture barrier over crawl spaces or slabs and make sure the subfloor is completely flat, dry, and level. Minor imperfections can be leveled with contractor's paper. Begin by snapping a chalk line along the longest, straightest wall in the room. With the grooved side of the first floor plank facing the wall, pre-drill holes along its edge and nail it to the floor every 6 inches following your chalk line. Use plastic spacers between the wall and flooring to ensure a consistent expansion gap. If using an air-powered finish nailer, pre-drilling may not be necessary. Work all the way to the end of the wall, cutting the final board to size. You can use the waste piece from the final board to begin your next row. Next, drive nails at a 45-degree angle along the tongue of the first row and into the subfloor. Lay the next row by slotting the grooved edge over the exposed tongue of the first row. Use a hammer and rubber block to close the tongue and groove joint tightly. Proceed down the second row, driving nails every 6 inches at a 45-degree angle into the tongue. Make sure the end joints between each row are spaced at least 18 inches apart for a random appearance and to add rigidity to the installation. Follow this process from row to row until you reach the end of the room. A flooring stapler can be used as a high-productive tool for fastening the boards. You may also need to undercut door jambs to allow the thickness of the new floor. You'll probably have to rip the final row to width before installation. Nail and/or glue the last row in place. Use a lamb hammer or a hammer and pull bar to close the joint along the final row of boards. To give the floor a distressed appearance after installation, the idea is basically to beat a random texture into its surface. The small dents and dings of the wood provide tiny shadow lines and low spots that accumulate stain for darker tones and contrast. You can get creative in your choice of distressing tools, but I used a heavy toe chain and 1/2-inch hex nuts threaded over a wire. Use one tool at a time to inflict the texture in a completely random manner. Be careful not to unconsciously create a recognizable pattern which looks artificially produced. Vary the tools according to effect. For example, the sharp dings from the nuts left smaller, finer impressions in the floor that ultimately achieved the most dramatic stain retention. The larger dents achieved from the trucker's chain retained less stain but provided a more mottled texture along with interesting light reflections after the varnish was added. Vacuum the floor thoroughly before staining. I used a gel stain which wipes on and off easily. I didn't want a very dark stain, only enough to accentuate the relief in the surface, so I wiped it on the wood with a rag, then immediately wiped it off. The quick on-off application style provided all the color tone I wanted. Allow the stain to dry overnight. Wood flooring must be sealed to make it water and stain resistant. I used a clear semi-gloss polyurethane coating with fast drying properties. I applied the varnish with a foam painter's pad on an extension handle, making sure to spread each coat very thin. Allow to completely dry, then scuff sand the floor to promote adhesion of the second coat, and repeat the process for up to 4 coats of varnish.